are such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke McKenna, but today's case is about the Crawford family and the perfect murder plot. This is not the usual family murder case. Much more planning had to be done than the usual crime of passion. The wrong family member was also blamed, but one of the biggest mistakes a killer could make would unravel that entire theory. By the way, I post so much content like this. It is my absolute passion to tell these stories, and I mean no harm or disrespect when I do so. So if it's something you'd like to support me in doing, all you have to do is make sure you are subscribed with the post notification bell on, giving this video a thumbs up, and leaving a nice comment down below. I want to thank the True Crime Couple podcast, as well as the book Almost Perfect, The True Story of the Crawford Family, for providing most of the information for this case. And if you didn't know, I am actually posting every Thursday and Sunday at 2 p.m. Central Standard Time for ODDtober, where the strangest cases will be being uploaded. And also, if you didn't know, I have released merch this month, and here are a few of your guys' pictures of you guys in the merch, and you all look so freaking adorable, and it makes me so happy to see you guys in them and see you guys loving them. And if you would like your face featured on my channel, then all you have to do is post a picture of you wearing the merch on Instagram and tag me, and I would love to see it. It really means a lot that you guys support me, that you guys come back and watch my videos, want to get merch. It truly does mean everything. And also, if you haven't watched all of the ODDtobers from previous years, there will be a playlist down below with a whole bunch of spooky Halloween videos. Now let's get back to the story. So it was 1970 in Australia, and the Crawford family lived in Melbourne. This was Elmer Crawford, who was a 41-year-old electrician, and his wife Teresa, who was 35. They had actually met when Teresa was a young nurse who had a ton of friends who went out all the time. Teresa was actually known to be the most bubbly, outgoing friend that was always dragging her friends outside to different places to go. She was so adventurous, and she had a desire to constantly be dancing. During one of these nights out, she never expected to meet the love of her life, but that's exactly what happened. She would come in contact with Elmer, and as soon as the two met, they knew it was an instant connection. After this, they were inseparable, and not long after that, they actually got married. But this wasn't just because they felt a desire to rush into it. This was actually because Teresa had become pregnant with Elmer's child. She was very religious, and she wanted to be married to the father of her baby. 13 years later, they lived at 136 Cardinal Road in a suburb called Glenroy, and there they had 3 children by this point. Now, the oldest was a 13-year-old named Catherine Jane, then an 8-year-old named James William, and then a 6-year-old named Karen Jean. Elmer was working as a telephone mechanic at this time at the Victoria Racing Club, while Teresa stayed home with the children. His family was quite the quiet family that kept to themselves. They weren't struggling, they had a decent amount of money, and they seemed to be happy. But this would all come to an end. On July 2nd, a different family entirely headed on vacation. They were going to the Port Campbell National Park to see the Loch Ard Gorge, and this was like a cliff that you could look over and see this body of water at the bottom, but it was said to be beautiful, a must-see, and so that's exactly what this family was doing. The father had binoculars so they could all look down at this landscape, but what they would find was tire tracks nearby. This was normal. You could drive, close to the edge at the top of this cliff, but you couldn't drive, of course, too close because people were worried about the safety hazards. But these were tires leading over the edge. They were extremely concerned seeing these tire tracks, and they began to edge closer to this ledge while still being safe to see what had happened. And that is when they found a car on a ledge at the bottom of the cliff about to fall into the body of water. This family could not see if there was anybody inside this car, but they could see the license plate number. So with that, they took this information and they went to the nearest place where they could call the police, because of course cell phones weren't a thing. So they had to go and find a place to be able to call them. The investigators were called, but unfortunately they were not surprised. Apparently this was a location where many used this to take their own lives, and so this had happened prior. But when the police arrived, they had to figure out a way to safely make it down to this car so they could see if anybody was inside. They could see that it was a white 1956 FE Holden, and due to the damage to the front of the car where it had smashed into this rock, survivors were not likely. Investigators knew that the safest way to see what was in this car was to bring it up to them rather than going down to it. But they also had one man who had experience being able to climb these dangerous places and be able to get down safely. So they hired this man, and he would head down to assist them in bringing it up. He didn't see anyone inside this car, but when he opened the door, the stench made him fear the worst. Unfortunately, when they brought the car up, they found that there were bodies inside. It was not empty. 4 victims were inside of this vehicle, and there was also a .22 caliber rifle in the passenger seat, as well as a box filled with family photos. Now, the roof also had blood on it. There was also a registration inside the car which told investigators where this family lived, and they actually lived around 149 miles away, or 240 kilometers. So it was quite the drive from their home to get to this location. Needing more information about this family and hoping that somebody would be at home to tell them more, investigators headed to their home at 136 Cardinal Road. Now, they knocked on the door at around 6 p.m., but it was completely dark inside and nobody answered. There was also a loaf of bread that had been left outside for delivery, and no one had picked it up. And who would just leave a piece of food outside for the animals to eat if they were home? The neighbors were then talked to, but they had no idea where this family had gone. They didn't see them leave, and they didn't know why they would have left. This, of course, was the home of the Crawford family, and investigators began to get worried that possibly something had happened inside the home, and that's why nobody was answering there either. Around the same time, they had also gotten a call from some of the Crawford neighbors saying that they believed they had seen Elmer, the father, not him necessarily, but his motorbike at the back of the house, and he never went anywhere without his motorbike. He was always riding it. So investigators decided to break into the home that night and begin to look around to see if possibly he had been staying there. The thing was, they had not yet identified the bodies in the car and didn't know which members of the family were deceased. But inside this home, they would immediately find a crime scene, a horrific one at that. There was half-clean bloodstains all over the house, as well as wires with alligator clips attached to them, which they had no idea what that could be for. No bodies were found in this home, but they realized quickly that they were wrong about the crime scene being at that cliff with the car. The home was the real crime scene. More officers were then called to this home, and each officer was given a room to investigate themselves so they could prevent cross-contamination of the blood. Blood trails were found to be leading from 2 different rooms headed to a kitchen where there was a pile of blood-stained male pajamas, and actually in the sink there was a bowl of soggy cereal, but the milk wasn't spoiled yet, so this meant somebody had been eating the cereal recently and had set it in the sink. There was no signs of forced entry anywhere around this home, and that is when investigators found notes on the kitchen table. Now, one was to a woman named Jean Crawford, and this was a half-written note that only said the words "next to kin." That was it. And then there was also one to the milkman who said that they didn't need any more deliveries after that time period. None of these were ever finished or sent, and they believed that they had caught someone in the middle of writing these notes and then they fled. They also found another one that was in the living room in a different spot that was addressed to Teresa's sister, Vonnie. This was from Teresa, or so they thought, saying that Teresa was unhappy about being pregnant again, but couldn't do anything about it. it. An engagement ring was also found in the living room, as well as a newspaper article that had been cut out that was talking about a mother's agony and depression years, and it was about abortion. Investigators quickly realized that the family of 5 was now a family of 6 because Teresa was pregnant. Now, all of this inside the home was extremely strange, but not as strange as it was when they realized that this family of 6 was missing a member inside of the vehicle. There was only 5 victims if you included the baby in Teresa's stomach. Now, the car was being brought up, and it was in quite a strange condition when they found it. It had the usual damage of a crashed vehicle, but the back seat was also missing. And at first it looked as though nobody was in the car. There was a whole bunch of trash in the back seat, but that was it. There was also a hose from the exhaust pipe going into the driver's side window, and there was a rope from the steering wheel to the trunk that was possibly to keep it from going straight without a driver. That is when a foot was seen. Investigators quickly found that there were victims wrapped in blankets at the back of the vehicle. This was the Crawford family, but not all of them. You see, this was Teresa, her unborn child, Catherine, James, and Karen. But the father of the family, Elmer Crawford, was nowhere to be seen, and of course the first thought was that he should be the prime suspect of his family's deaths. But what I didn't tell you was that what was also found in the Crawford home was a little card. This was from the Red Cross, and this said that Elmer was type O blood. Why does this matter? Well, because in this Crawford's car, blood was found on the roof, and this was type O blood. The rest of the Crawford family had type A blood, and the type A blood was what was found at their home. It was believed that Elmer had been inside this car and was lost at sea during the crash, had possibly been thrown out when the car crashed into the ledge. However, this didn't clear him as being the prime suspect. Instead, investigators now believed it was a murder-suicide and that Elmer had driven his family off the cliff in order to take all of their lives. Yet this theory was also ruled out when the car was inspected, and it was found that the fans of the coolant system of the car were not damaged in the crash. Now, if you're like me and have no idea what that could mean, this meant that they were not spinning during the crash, and this meant that no one was pushing down the gas when the car went over the ledge. So it would have had to have been pushed. No one would have been driving it. But investigators didn't want to assume anything with such a strange crime scene, so they decided to remake it. They wanted to bring the same vehicle in. They put dummies in the back of the vehicle just like they were found, but they also put one in the driver's seat as though it was Elmer. They then pushed this car off of the ledge in the same exact location as they believed the car had gone off of. They did this while putting it in neutral as they believed the car was put in when it was pushed. Now, the car landed in almost the same exact position, yet the driver dummy was still inside. This meant that Elmer Crawford was very unlikely to have been thrown out of this vehicle during the crash, and that meant a killer was on the run. In fact, talking to neighbors again, a few people claimed to have seen Mr. Crawford the same day his family was found dead, and they didn't report this because he was their neighbor, he was in his driveway, and they didn't have any reason to think he was doing anything suspicious. He was just standing there. But anyone who knew Elmer was talked to at this point to see if they could get any information. Pretty much everyone claimed he was a quiet man who kept to himself. They didn't really know anything about him. Even those who worked with him said that he did good work, but he didn't talk to them about anything. He came to work, he got a paycheck, and he went home. Yet at the same time, his neighbors said that he was always there for them if they needed it. He was always fixing different kids in the neighborhood's bikes. He was also setting up illegal phone lines for his neighbors so that they didn't have to pay for the phone bills, and no one had a problem with him. at least when he was in a good mood. You see, it was also said that he had quite the temper, and that he would randomly explode in fits of anger, and they would come out of nowhere. And it was said that Teresa and the kids did their best to keep him in a good mood so that he wouldn't get upset. It was also then found that 2 weeks before these murders, Elmer and Teresa had written a new will. They each had, and this said that all of the money would go to Elmer in the event of a family accident, the family's death. Now, because of the note that Teresa had written about not wanting another baby, investigators wondered if this had anything to do with the murders, if this could possibly be motive. There was also a possibility that it could be because Elmer had recently been stealing from his work, and it was believed that he was close to getting caught for this. You see, he was stealing items from his job and reselling them to make more money. But it turned out both of these motives could have possibly been the reason combined. Investigators then put together a timeline of what they believed happened, and they said they believed Elmer killed his wife Teresa first, knowing that she wouldn't allow him to go through the plan of killing their children if she was still alive. She was thought to be writing this letter after putting the kids to bed when she felt someone behind her. She stood up and she saw Elmer there with something in his hand that he then decided to beat her with. He then bludgeoned his wife, and he even went the extra mile to then electrocute her. You see, he had created this electrocution device where he used all of the power in the home, and he put it into this device where if he turned on the lights in the home, it would electrocute. He also had a wire that had alligator clips on the end of it, and it was believed that he then attached these alligator clips to Teresa's ears and electrocuted her to death. He didn't stop there either. He then murdered all of his children. At first, he went to the daughter's bedroom and hit them until he believed they were dead. The oldest daughter was then electrocuted as well, but he left the youngest alone. That's when he was going to head to his son James's room, but James had been woken up by all of this noise, and he began to walk to where his mother was to find comfort in his mother until he could go back to sleep. But unfortunately, before he made it there, he was struck in the back of the head by his own father and killed. That's when investigators believed that Elmer threw everyone in the back of his car wrapped in sheets from their own beds, and this was where the seat had been taken out to make room for them. He then covered their bodies in trash to conceal them in case he was stopped on the way to this dumping location. The cliff was also a place that Elmer went to often because he would always camp or hike there, and investigators believe that he had always planned to take them to the cliff. He had brought gas to make sure he never had to stop at a gas station. He had snacks on him like chocolate chips to keep him full during this 3 hours. But that night it was raining and it was dark, and Elmer had to work fast. He was unable to get the car close enough to the cliff like he had planned because they had rocks that kept people from driving over, because they knew it was a place many tried to take their lives, and they tried to prevent that. But he then got out of the car and he made a pathway with these rocks where he could drive the car over without a problem. While he was moving them, it was believed that he had an injury to him, which is why there was blood on the roof that matched his blood, because he got back in while it was cold and rainy to have a break before he got back out, because then his plan was to make it look like a suicide with the exhaust pipe to the window. The accelerator was then thought to be held down by a boot with a hammer inside, and he then pushed it off the ledge. This appeared to be almost the perfect murder plot, and he might have gotten away with it too. But there was one huge mistake he made. You see, he was too scared to get close to the cliff because it was raining and he didn't want to fall over himself. So he didn't see what was down below. He just ran off. But what he missed was that there was not enough momentum for the car to go into the water, and it had stopped on the ledge. This meant that the water didn't make the car disappear forever, making everybody wonder what the world happened to the Crawford family, because it was in plain view for everyone to see. Because if that would have happened and the car had disappeared, Teresa could have been blamed for the murder-suicide of her children because of the fact that she didn't want her pregnancy. And Elmer could have seemed like a heartbroken father who had no idea his wife was struggling and missed his murdered children. That's how easy it could have been for Elmer to frame his wife in the murder of their children when he was the one who had done it. Thankfully, though, the truth was exposed when that car smashed into the ledge on the cliff. Another tip then came forward, and this was that Elmer had been seen after this murder had occurred. You see, one of Karen, the youngest children's friends, always came over to walk with her to school. And she did that. So that same morning, she did the same thing she always did. She knocked on the door, but Elmer opened the door, and this was normally something that Teresa did. So this girl was taken aback, and she asked if Karen was ready for school. Elmer told her that she was actually sick with the flu and wouldn't be going to school, and her friend asked if she could see her. Elmer said no, that she needed to rest, and told her basically to go away. His friend told Elmer to tell her to get better soon and that she was going to miss her. Elmer told her that he would, and then she left and went to school. But this meant that Elmer was at his home before the police got there and was possibly the culprit for the cereal in the sink. But he hadn't done a great job of cleaning up the crime scene. But he did do a great job of running. Now, a year later, and no sign of Elmer was ever found, and a coroner finally found that Elmer was responsible for the murder of his family members. You see, the Crawford family had been struggling for years prior, and this is something that would be uncovered slowly throughout that year. Teresa had grown up Catholic, so when she got pregnant, they basically felt like they had to get married. And Elmer, on the other hand, was raised by grandparents, had always just gone from, one job to another. He was always good with his hands, so even though he didn't have proper training, he could get really good jobs. So with that, Elmer and Teresa moved into a little garage or land that they had bought in order to build a house for themselves, which Elmer did. Elmer was said to be able to do pretty much anything anybody needed him to do. He would just figure it out. But the family that seemed to be so happy all started to collapse when Teresa had her third child. She was dealing with postpartum depression, which back then was not known about at all, and so people believe she just had a nervous breakdown. And she slept all day, only woke up to feed the kids, and was having a really hard time. Elmer decided that the only way that she could possibly get better is if her parents were there to help her, so he actually flew them in using the little money the family had, and they helped take care of the children for about 3 months. But when that was up, they left, and Teresa was a little bit better. Elmer then told her that she was going to take birth control, and they were never going to have another kid again because he didn't want it, and he didn't want her to act like that ever again. Teresa didn't want to take birth control, though, because she was Catholic, and that's something she just didn't believe in. But she ended up doing what she was told because she didn't want to go through that either. And after that, the family was doing well for a while, and they even seemed to have some extra cash. Everybody in their community kind of made the same amount of money and had the same types of things. However, the Crawford family seemed to be coming into some different money. They were going on vacations all the time. They were never struggling, and it just seemed weird to everybody who knew them. Many believed he was stealing from his job and selling the items to make extra money. But no one could prove it. And it was also said that Teresa wasn't allowed to spend any of this money. Eventually, Teresa did stop taking birth control because it was really getting to her to be going against her beliefs. But then she got pregnant, and Elmer was furious, demanding that she get an abortion. Now, this is not what Teresa wanted, and she began to hint at it to Elmer, saying there were lots of articles coming out in the newspapers about the emotional effects of abortions and what it can do to women who are forced to do so. And although she didn't want to get an abortion, Teresa was no longer happy with the idea of having a baby because Elmer made it so she was miserable even thinking about it. Elmer was still trying to force her to get rid of the baby when she finally told him that if she did so, she would also be telling his bosses that he was stealing from them. And that is where investigators knew there was a motive. There was a motive from both sides, because Elmer didn't want a baby, and he also was being threatened by his wife. They still didn't know where this killer had gone. 24 years later, and this case was still one of Australia's biggest missing persons cases. Then, suddenly, they had another clue. This was in 1997 in Perth, and a woman contacted police saying that she was back from her vacation, but while she was there, she had actually seen Elmer Crawford. She said she knew him because she lived in the same town that he was from, and he would come in to sell those items he was stealing from his work to her. She said he had his hair dyed. It also appeared as though he had like a toupee or something on because there was gaps that didn't connect to his skin, so it was believed he was possibly bald. But she also said she didn't go up to him and tell him that she remembered him or that she knew him at all because he was a killer and everybody believes he's a killer, and she didn't want to get involved with that, so she decided to just talk to him like a random stranger. And that is when he told her he was going to New South Wales. At this point, she said that her husband told her that she was not going to contact police immediately because they didn't want to spoil the vacation if they had to go talk to police, because they knew it was going to take a while. So by the time they got back from their vacation, Elmer was gone. Elmer never collected the money from the family's will, and he vanished off the face of the earth, or so it seemed. Then, in 2005, 35 years since the murders, a man was found dead in Texas. He was found with multiple different identities, and he allegedly looked quite a bit like the photo that was the age-progressed photo of Elmer Crawford. So they decided to use facial recognition technology, and this identified him as a possible match. Now they just needed to test the DNA. The results came back a few years later and found that this was not Elmer Crawford. This was another dead end. And 3 years later, a $100,000 reward was offered. And 2 years later, the FBI got involved. This was in 2010, and Elmer was still one of Australia's most wanted men. He would actually be 91 years old if he's still alive. The Victoria Police say that this case is still open, and they have not given up on hope that they can get justice for this family. They say it's definitely solvable if they can just get the right information. They have everything else, they just need him or his body. So if you have any information, please call Crime Stoppers International at 31088 5543240. This is what he is believed to look like today. Now, of course, their family home was put up for sale after a while because the family was all gone. Now, this is when a family moved in. This family that moved in had a little son themselves, and he had this imaginary friend that he was always talking to and playing with, and his name was James, the same name as the murdered son of Elmer Crawford. As his son got older, he saw a picture of the Crawford family and was baffled because his imaginary friend was in this photo. It is believed that James's soul was either trapped or attached to this home after being murdered, and he wanted to keep this new boy safe. The boy said James never spoke to him, but he did communicate in his own ways, facial expressions, and just often was there for him when he was in trouble or was sad, and would always hug him or rub his back. So the Crawford family has never gotten justice. Do you believe that he will ever be caught? Do you think he's still alive today, being 91 years old? And also, how do you think a wanted man hid for 50 years with no one but one woman seeing him? There is said to be many different locations in Australia where you can work kind of underground with your hands in the mines, and you work for cash, so nobody has to really know who you are and nobody will ask. So it's believed that that's possibly where he went, but the fact that he got away with his family's murder is horrific. And I just wonder, did he mean to take his own life that way, that same day that he took his family's, and just chickened out and ran? Or do you think he always wanted to just murder them and then run? These kind of cases really just make you wonder what makes people like Elmer Crawford snap. What was it that led up to him just completely going nuts and killing his entire family and going to so much effort to really make it look like a suicide, and how close he was to getting away with it? I mean, he did get away with it, but you know how close he was to having it be blamed on his own wife and being able to stay in his home and say that it was all her fault, you know? That's just horrifying to me that he could have done that, and it was so close to being perfect. And he was just an average father and husband. I'd love to know what you think down below, and I really hope that you are enjoying ODDtober. Make sure to come back every Thursday and Sunday, and make sure to check out the playlist below if you are wanting to watch any more ODDtober videos. Don't ever forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay, bye.